Hi guys, and welcome back to another 5 Minute Friday. This is the third part of my Heroes of Rorke's Drift series, and today we're learning all about the man who many consider to have been the unsung hero and the brains behind the successful British defence of Rorke's Drift in 1879. So if you're new to the channel, let me fill you in really quickly. My name is Chris, aka Redcoat History, and this is a channel for military history geeks. A place where we examine and explore the great campaigns and characters of British military history. I also do a monthly hour-long podcast, which is also available on YouTube, as well as this shorter strand, which I do twice a month. If that sounds like your sort of thing, then be sure to subscribe and let me know in the comments what conflicts you're most interested in. But anyway, back to today's film, and we're talking about James Langley Dalton.
Mr. Chard.
Commissary Dalton, is it?
That is correct. Mr. Chard, you've just asked this man
To pour the soup on the fires. See that he does it. And all these bags of maize inside the perimeter.
Now, unless you're a fellow Zulu war geek, you may not know the name. But Dalton was a true warrior, a soldier through and through, who many historians believe was the main reason that the small garrison at Rorke's Drift wasn't wiped out when it was attacked by 4,000 Zulus on the 22nd of January 1879. Dalton was part of a three-man team with the Commissariat Department that were looking after the stores for Lord Chelmsford's central column for the invasion of Zululand. His boxes and tins were stacked in and around the chapel at Rorke's Drift. In his mid-40s, sporting a thick manly beard, Dalton had the eyes of a man who knew his business. As the news of the disaster at Isandlwana reached the mission station, Lieutenants Chard and Bromhead decided to strike the camp and make a dash for the village of Helpmacar, where there were more British troops. Seeing the wagons being loaded, Dalton stepped in and made it clear that if the garrison tried to run, they would be quickly caught and butchered in the open by the fast-moving Zulus. This statement of fact seemed to have the desired effect, and Chard quickly countermanded his earlier orders and instead focused on strengthening the post's defences. So who was this man? Why would imperial officers listen to a lowly, locally recruited acting assistant commissary? Well, let's go back in time a little bit and find out. James Langley Dalton was born around 1833. I say around because I haven't been able to find the exact date. It appears to be uncertain. As a teenager, he joined the 85th Regiment of Foot, which would later go on to become the King's Shropshire Light Infantry. In 1855, while serving with that regiment in Mauritius, he was promoted to sergeant, and then shortly afterwards he and his unit were posted to South Africa, a place that clearly got under his skin, as it has many of us. In 1862, he transferred from the infantry to the Commissariat Corps and was soon promoted to colour sergeant. In his new role, he served with Sir Garnet Wolseley during the Red River expedition of 1870 in Canada. It was a confusing, logistically challenging operation to squash a rebellion in the hard-to-reach Canadian province of Manitoba. Shortly afterwards, when the Commissariat was reorganised and merged with the military train to become the Army Service Corps, Dalton was promoted to Staff Sergeant. But after nearly 22 years of service, he had reached the end of the road and was finally discharged from the army in November 1871. He subsequently moved back to South Africa. Now, his movements after arriving back in the Cape aren't known, but his experience and military knowledge meant that when the 9th Cape Frontier War kicked off against the Xhosa, he had no trouble finding work as an acting assistant commissary, working alongside the army organising their supplies. He did excellent work, as you would assume, and he was the only civilian to be mentioned in dispatches for his ability in keeping the mobile columns supplied with food and ammunition. At the end of the Frontier War, he kept his position working with the army and moved into Natal ready for the invasion of Zululand. During the fight for Rorke's Drift on the 22nd of January 1879, Dalton showed time and time again his leadership quality and bravery. As the battle raged, he prowled the perimeter, encouraging the men and offering his help and advice. He was also one of a small group, including Lieutenant Bromhead, who had been battling to hold one of the most vulnerable points in the perimeter, which was a dangerous gap in the biscuit box wall. Reverend Smith, who was also one of the defenders, has left us this description of Dalton at work. Mr. Dalton, who is a tall man, was continually going about the barricades, fearlessly exposing himself and cheering the men, and using his own rifle most effectively. A Zulu ran up near the barricade. Mr. Dalton called out, "Pot that fellow!" and himself aimed over the parapet at another, when his rifle dropped and he turned round quite pale and said that he had been shot. The doctor was by his side at once and found that a bullet had passed quite through above the right shoulder. Dalton's injury was quite bad, but he survived the battle and was afterwards evacuated to help Makar. When the first flurry of Victoria Crosses were awarded for the battle, Dalton was ignored, as were a number of others who weren't regular British Army soldiers. It seemed clear to many that the men of B Company, 2nd Battalion 24 Foot were being favoured, and so a lot of high-level lobbying took place behind the scenes to rectify that situation. Eventually, Dalton's leadership and bravery were formally recognised, and in November 1879 his Victoria Cross was announced. The citation read, "For his conspicuous gallantry during the attack on Rorke's Drift by the Zulus on the night of 22nd of January 1879, when he actively superintended the works of defence and was foremost of those who received the first attack at the corner of the hospital, when the deadliness of his fire did great execution, and the mad rush of the Zulus met its first check, and whereby his cool courage saved the life of the Army Hospital Corps, by shooting the Zulu who, having seized the muzzle of the man's rifle, was in the act of assegaiing him. This officer, to whose energy much of the defence of the place was due, was severely wounded during the contest, but still continued to give the same example of good courage. He finally received his medal in a small ceremony from General Hugh Clifford VC at Fort Napier in 1880. After the Battle of Rorke's Drift, Dalton had been promoted, but then rather quickly and disappointingly was put on to half pay. With his career therefore seemingly over, he briefly returned to the UK. But he came back to South Africa not long afterwards and invested in a gold mine. Sadly though, he never made his millions, and after a short illness he died in January 1887. He's buried at Russell Road Roman Catholic Cemetery in Port Elizabeth. I hope to visit his grave actually next time I'm in the Eastern Cape. James Langley Dalton, sir, you're a true hero and I salute you. Some might say you're the real unsung hero of the Battle of Rorke's Drift. Okay guys, well thanks for listening, and if you enjoyed the video then please hit that subscribe button, share the links with others who have a love for history, and let's try and build this community and keep British military history alive. Next week I'll be releasing my latest podcast episode, which is all about the Battle of Busako in 1810 during the Peninsular War, and then I'll be back with another 5 Minute Friday at the end of the month. Until then, take care.